I want to talk about tantric psychology. When we talk about psychology, we're talking about the study of psyche. So, to understand tantric psychology, we have to understand how traditional tantra understands this word psyche. So, first of all, we have to understand who we are right now in relationship to what seems to be an external world. So when we talk about an external world versus an internal world, which is the normal way in Western psychology, that we distinguish what's in our heads, so to speak, versus what's out there, we make a false dichotomy, according to Tantra. Tantra, being non-dualistic, wants to see everything as one. And so this wants to see is not quite the right way of saying it. It sees everything as one in deep meditative samadhi kind of experiences. One experiences everything as one. So how does one get from this ordinary consciousness where everything is not one? There's you and me, and there's the dog and the cat, and there's bees and sharks and mountains and cars and all kinds of things that don't seem to be interconnected at all if you just look at them. But Tantra says, no, it doesn't matter what you think is going on here. What's going on here is much deeper than what you see. But don't worry. The way you see it right now is fine for now. But Tantra psychology, the study of this psyche as Tantra understands it, will help you orient yourself in this experience more accurately, ever more accurately, ever more deeply, so that it is not that you have to become something that you're not at all. Rather, you become more and more aware of what you always have been and always will be in your deepest being. Okay, let me give you some concrete examples here. So, Tantra in its practicality starts with the body, the physical body. It says, okay, this is a boundary of some kind. We normally see that inside the body is sort of us and outside the body is not us. So let's start with this boundary. We're not going to accept it as an arbitrary or permanent boundary necessarily. We're going to allow the possibility that our perception of this boundary will evolve as our understanding evolves and deepens. So when we're talking about this body, this boundary between us and the world, the connection between the us and the out there is through 5 senses, right? What are our 5 senses? Sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. And that's it. And so these 5 senses give us, if you forgive the expression, a picture or an experience all mixed together of what's out there. All right. So what Tantra calls these 5 senses are the 5 elements, or rather, what these 5 senses present to us are the 5 elements of experience. It's not that the world, which we know from science, or Western science, is made up of how many 100 and some physical elements. We're not talking about scientific elements here exactly. We're talking about more a metaphorical, but still practical, a psychological understanding of elements. So reality, according to the psychological analysis, consists of 5 elements. What we perceive through smell. I'm going to go in a particular order here, and I'll explain why later, but what we perceive through smell, taste, sight, touch, and sound, that creates an experience of the world. And so when we say the world is composed of 5 elements, in Tantra, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 5 psychological categories of experience. Okay? Why psychological? Well, if you start with a Western view, the dualistic view, then what's out there is separate from what's in here. You've got a problem, because what's out there is entirely conditioned, or what we think is out there, what we can perceive is out there, is entirely conditioned through our 5 senses. And of course the mind. We'll get to that. But the 5 senses create our sense of physical reality. And our 5 senses have a particular bandwidth of perception. Each of them can perceive radiation, if you will, or energies within a certain limited bandwidth. And the bandwidth of our human perceptions are not the same as the perceptions of other animals we know. For instance, honeybees can perceive energies that enable them to navigate over long distances without our usual psychological apparatus to be able to do that. Pigeons, again, long-distance navigation, perhaps they can perceive outside what we consider visible light into the ultraviolet range that enables them to see patterns, that enables them to navigate in ways that we don't understand. Sharks are like swimming noses, or like dogs of the sea. They can perceive tiny bits of blood in huge volumes of seawater. It's just it boggles the imagination. Or eagles, with their incredible vision, can clearly see tremendous detail at unthinkable distances, because their physical organs are different. Their 5 senses are different and are uniquely adapted to their needs for their environment. But the shark's world, or the giant squid's world, or the eagle's world is not our world. Each of us creates, as it were, our own world from our 5 senses that are unique to us in some way. I mean, all humans probably have somewhat similar perceptions, but that's not even true. Artists see things that other people don't see. People can be trained, scientists, to see and understand things in ways that non-scientists don't really understand and see. So, and our senses can be magnified with things like microscopes and telescopes and so on, where we can become aware of things that our normal 5 senses wouldn't know. In any case, our understanding of ourselves in our place in the universe is entirely mediated by the limitations of our senses, whether they're amplified or not. And so that's where we are. And Tantra says we always have to start from where we are. Now, that isn't the end of the story. But you need to get the point that out there isn't entirely separate from in here. Rather, what we think or understand or perceive as out there is entirely conditioned by this organism that only permits us to experience a certain bandwidth of what's out there, a bandwidth that's needed for our survival as organic beings in this environment. And, it works pretty well most of the time, but it's limited. It's not reality in Big R. It's just a version of reality. So when you get that there is no reality Big R that we can know or perceive through our five senses, there's only our reality at any moment. You're beginning to get into how Tantra understands psyche in relationship to the world.